monetize that way.
Should be live.
Okay, cool.
All right, we're live. You can't hear.
I can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
You don't hear the YouTube though, do you?
No.
Okay. Just gonna mute it then. What am I doing?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm watching you on my phone.
All right, we're live. We have... Oh, we got 5 people on. Okay, so I can start, I guess.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, you good? Okay, so I'm sure there's people out there, but hi, everyone. Welcome to our live stream talking about Vimy Ridge, photos, the war, the battle, whatever. We'll see how this goes. I've never done this before. Pretty sure that's obvious, but it should be a good time. I'm glad to have Carla-Jean on here. This is going to be good. She knows a lot more about the photos and all that stuff behind it, way more than I could ever know. So I'm glad to have her and be able to talk about that stuff and all the myths connected to that and why we think about it the way we do and all that good stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to her for a few minutes, and she's just going to kind of give some background on a little bit of stuff related to photos and photographers and that kind of thing. And anytime, feel free to write some questions, comments, what have you, in the side chat there, and we'll get to them when we can. So let's have some fun. Carla, are you ready to go?
All right. Yeah. I might as well have been born in a totally different decade because I'm like watching us on my phone, and how exciting. All right. So I just want to start with a poll that I actually did yesterday for Vimy Ridge Day. And
just going to kind of give...
Oh, I don't want it. We probably shouldn't be playing. Yeah. So I did a poll yesterday because somebody who will remain nameless said that I was wrong for saying that Ivor Castle is a relatively obscure figure. And because I'm extremely self-serving in everything I do, I wanted to know if I was right or not. So I asked my tweeps, do you know who Ivor Castle is? He's the Canadian official photographer who took most of the photographs of Vimy Ridge that people were posting. So he's Canada's official photographer. So if people were posting, for example, private photographs, then of course he didn't take those. So most people responded with, who is Ivor Castle? And then the follow-up is, if you do know about Castle, why do you know about him? And almost 60% said, I only know about him because I follow you, Carla-Jean. So I felt very gratified by these results, sort of. That yes, I think Ivor Castle is a relatively obscure figure. And I will tell you guys a little bit about him today, but this is certainly not any kind of lecture. We're just here to chat and ask each other questions and have questions from you and just enjoy. So as I said, Ivor Castle was Canada's official photographer. He was born in 1877 in Bristol. We don't know too much about when he learned photography or how he learned photography. His school records indicate that he had an aptitude for the arts. I think that his photographs show that he had a real eye for aesthetics. Hopefully I've selected a few of those to actually talk about. He worked for the Daily Mirror beginning in 1904, and the Daily Mirror sent him all over the world. His family still has his postcards today, which are very cool, just from all these different countries that he visited. He sent postcards back to his wife. So some really famous photographs by Ivor Castle that probably everyone has seen is this series of 4 called that I kind of call Over the Top. And these, I just brought them up today because sometimes we'll see the one that's in the top left and actually the top right as well. They sometimes get posted with people saying that they're taken during the Battle of Vimy Ridge, but they're absolutely not.
Yeah, the bottom right as well.
Yeah.
See that one everywhere.
Yeah. And you have to laugh. Like, if you think that that's a genuine photograph of battle, you definitely
Yeah.
need to think, where is the photographer standing? But I don't blame anyone for thinking that it's a genuine battle photograph, because certainly I probably thought it was until I did a little bit of research, and now we know pretty widely through the secondary literature that other people have done our homework for us and have pointed these things out. So that's completely fine. And we'll get a little bit back to why people think that the top two were taken during the Battle of Vimy Ridge. But another photograph that you'll see everywhere when we're talking about the Battle of Vimy Ridge is the long caption is the 29th Infantry Battalion advancing over no man's land during the Battle of Vimy Ridge. And then on the left, we have one version of it where we have the soldiers marching across the middle of the frame. So they're marching across the frame. That's nice. And then on the right, we have some more shell bursts in the sky. And then we all of a sudden have these two dead bodies right in the foreground. So what's interesting about this photograph, and I think this is sort of well known now, but maybe not for everyone, is that the original contained no dead bodies. And in fact, they were added in from another photo, which was also titled as having been taken during the Battle of Vimy Ridge. So why would a photographer add dead bodies when we think wartime censorship means that you should be taking the bodies out? Dr. Laura Brandon, who was the art historian at the Canadian War Museum, wrote a really wonderful article about this. And I think she very convincingly states that Ivor Castle, in conjunction with Lord Beaverbrook, who ran the Canadian War Records Office, they're trying to create this image of Vimy. We know that Vimy was a victory for the Canadian Corps, but it wasn't an easy one by any means. It was the bloodiest day for the Canadian military. So how do we show that in a photograph? We construct an image in which we see soldiers that are marching, but some soldiers that have fallen. So yeah, Dr. Laura Brandon, look for her article on that if you want to learn more. But so these are photographs that you'll see all over the place for what I like to call like commemoration marketing. Sometimes you'll see it with the dead body, sometimes you won't. Often there's no acknowledgement that this is a composite photograph. You'll probably never hear that it was taken by Ivor Castle, but that's just me up on my soapbox again. So that's fine.
That's true though.
Let's see. Oh, here we go. This is just the cover of the Illustrated London News. This is a cover from a photograph taken by Ivor Castle. So like I said before, we don't know when he first picked up a photograph, but he did have an image on the cover of the Illustrated London News by the time he was 20 years old. I think that's pretty significant. I'm almost 34 and like, I haven't done that. So good for him. I think he was going places. And I just have a few more photographs here. If you've seen any of my online talks, I'm recycling a few images, but they're just really famous ones that you may have seen. These are some photographs of a British tank. It's supposedly in action. I think somebody has pointed out that it has been demobilized. I think Brad has one of these on a postcard.
That one there. Oh, I have
this guy.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I can't get to it.
Oh, that's okay. The Canadian War Records Office sold the rights to these photographs to the Daily Mirror for £1,000 in 1916. So that's a ginormous. Wow. I am an accredited historian. That's a ginormous amount of money for 105 years ago. I cannot do math. I'm a historian and not a mathematician. So,
same.
Really famous photographs. Castle became credited, this may not be true, but he was credited as the first photographer to take photographs of tanks in action. And a few more images here. I just love this one so much. They're wearing, obviously, German helmets. This is the cover of a book by Tim Cook now, so that's sort of how we know it. Shock troops. Are you even a Canadian military historian if you're not obsessed with Tim Cook? I don't think so.
Nope.
Another sort of really evocative one. This one's interesting. If we look at the sales records, not every photo was available for sale, but a lot of them were. They went on exhibition in 1916, 17, 18, and 19 in different exhibitions. This one was on view, I want to say the 1916 exhibition. Nope, because it was taken in March 1917. It must have been on view in the 1917 exhibition. And we do have the sales records at Library and Archives Canada that tell us that quite a few different officers actually ordered this one. So they really liked it, I guess. We have just another picture of Castle here, just to say that he was promoted from honorary lieutenant to honorary captain in February 1917. So he actually was quite famous for the time, according to historian Peter Robertson. Castle was made an instant celebrity through these photographs, particularly over the top and the taking of Vimy Ridge, that one with the dead bodies. So they were just hugely famous. They were both on exhibition. They were both published in several newspapers. So Castle's star is rising a bit. And now I would argue that he's not a household name that maybe he once was. However, what I do want to just leave you with here is the fact that when we're looking at photographs taken during the Battle of Vimy Ridge that are Canadian official, we want to remember that they were taken by him. And he's going to have his own set of choices in terms of how does he want to capture a scene. And then, so this brings us back to the cover of the Daily Mirror on April 11th, 1917, in which the Daily Mirror has elected to use one of the images from that 4-image set over the top in order to illustrate the battle, although this is not at all a picture from Vimy Ridge. But I have had a few people semi-recently ask me about this one and say, isn't that Vimy? And I say no, but this is probably where the confusion comes from. So I think that's all for my spiel for now, Brad, if you have any questions.
Yeah, actually, let's go to the chat real quick here. Sorry, excuse me. We had a question, sorry, I'm trying to find the name, from Sheldrake6, asking when would the photos from Vimy first be seen in Canada? Not necessarily in the UK, but in Canada itself.
I don't 100% know in Canada, like when the first newspapers to get them. I can tell you that the first time I've seen them in newspapers in the UK was April 16th. Okay. So if we think the battle ended on April 12th, by the 16th, we know they're in several UK newspapers. I can imagine it's probably not a ton of extra time to get over to Canada. And then they did go on exhibition. The Vimy Ridge photographs went on exhibition later in 1917. A copy of the exhibit was on view at Grafton Galleries in London, and then it toured across North America.
Okay. There was another follow-up question from Sheldrake6. Hold on, I was trying to find it. Sorry. Oh, okay. So they ask, as the Canadian Corps remained on the Vimy front, with the exception of Hill 70 for about a year, did Castle and other photographers document the battlefield afterwards?
Yeah, 100%. That's a great question. So the first Canadian official photographer got to France in May of 1916, and his name was Harry Noble. He was sort of in that service from May until around August. He suffered from neurasthenia, of what we might call shell shock, or maybe like there's different variances of that, but he obviously suffered from some sort of stress injury, and he was granted leave and actually went back to Canada. He was born in England, but he lived in Port Arthur, Ontario at that time. Then he was replaced by Ivor Castle, who was in the role from August 1916 till sort of around June or July of 1917, when it's really murky how much time he was spending on the Western Front, because he moved back and forth between France and London and had sort of a greater role working for the Canadian War Records Office, organizing those exhibitions, selecting which photographs were gonna be sent to the press, things like that. And then so he was replaced by a photographer named William Ryder. And actually the Battle of Hill 70 is Ryder's first sort of major engagement. And then he stayed with the Canadian Corps all the way to, I don't know how to say this name because I've only ever read it, but I have been there. Mons.
Yeah,
Mons.
Anglicize it like we do for everything else.
Exactly. No, I've been to Mons, but I can't say that. So he was there on November 11th, 1918.
Right. And there's some good photos from Mons at the end of the war.
Yeah, exactly. In the streets, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that are like shown, but I don't think as much as they, personally me as a non-photo historian, would think they would be shown, because I don't know.
It seems like there's maybe a dozen out of over 4,000 photographs taken by the Canadians. There's maybe 12 that just get shown.
Yeah, which is weird, but there's so many good stuff out there, and the stuff you show me now, it's mind-blowing that it's not shown more.
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it is all behind that, but whatever that may be. I had some questions for you. Oh, maybe you've said it, but okay. Actually, we got another question here I want to go to from our viewers. They asked, what are the circumstances of the over-the-top photos?
That photograph was taken during training at Saint Paul de Termoise. That's my bad French accent. So taken during training. So it's just soldiers that are just practicing emerging from a trench. Castle has taken the photographs. He's done a few things to add in bursts of smoke. He crops a little bit to take out a few things that are obviously just training tools as opposed to real tools of war. And then he puts them on exhibition, saying these are genuine photographs of battle. They're published in the Canadian War Pictorial, which is a Canadian War Records Office publication. They're published in newspapers. So it's really just the story that gets told about them that makes a lot of people believe that they're genuine. And of course, this is a time where people believe that the camera can't lie. And Castle's one of those people that knows that it really, really can.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not really any shade on Castle. It's just that it's really hard to photograph war and get all of its multi-faceted nature into one image. So those photographs, like I said, they were on exhibition. This was the December 1916 exhibition in London that then traveled around the world. And as it traveled, the newspaper coverage of the exhibition just got weirder and weirder and weirder. And there were more stories that were completely fabricated, saying like, oh, all of these guys died like 2 minutes later, which is just completely not true. And it's hard to know where the origins of those bizarre stories come from. But yeah, so Over the Top has this weird mythology around it. It's still published in newspapers in the 1930s. The Winnipeg Free Press and the Toronto Daily Star both republish a huge run of war photographs. And they don't even acknowledge that the photograph has been faked. So even in the 1930s, it's not common knowledge. It comes out in the 1970s when William Ryder, that third photographer, has an interview with the historian Peter Robertson, who's also an archivist at Library and Archives Canada. And he says, I'm going to set the record straight, which means that the record has not been set straight. And this is the 1970s. And it's really from there that the myth begins to unravel. And now it's sort of much more well-known by historians. But we say that with a grain of salt because there's like 5 photo historians that actually study Canadian war photography. So that's the story of Over the Top. I do have another video on YouTube that you can check out. That's the much longer version of that answer if you want to check it out.
Yeah, and I'll put all that stuff in the description after, and then we can share some stuff on Twitter and social media and whatever we have. I guess you guys have been hearing a lot from us lately, but you're going to hear more. So, well, you follow us, I guess. So you're going to get some more of that stuff. I had a question I just thought of for you. The name, again, I've had this question forever and I keep forgetting to ask you. Ryder, that is a strange double barrel name.
It is a really weird one. And I wish I knew the origins of it. It makes it so hard to do any genealogical research for him because, as we know, with records that are over 100 years old, there's a flagrant disregard for correct name spelling, first of all. So sometimes he's just called Ryder, and sometimes he's Ryder. Sometimes one of the Ryders is his middle name. Sometimes he's called Ryder, but it's R-Y-D-E-R instead of R-I. It's like all over the map. It is so hard to find anything about him because of that. Yeah. I think that his father was also William Ryder and his son was William Frederick Ryder. So like, can we just have the most white person name? So he's English.
Yeah. Okay.
How many William Ryders are there in England? Like Ryder, you just, yeah, it makes me want to bang my head against the wall trying to find more about him. So I'm very sorry. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I figure there's not much behind that, but it's just like every time I see it, it's so.
You never know. Like he might have.
Weird.
He's probably one of the photographers that has spoken the most about himself. So you never know if there was a little anecdote in there, but unfortunately not.
Yeah. I mean, I see it like you said, I've seen it and different, credited different ways, and I get confused even myself. Mm-hmm. I'm like, who's what? Yep. Yeah, who's this guy and why has he got a similar name? Oh, it's the same guy, Yep. So that's
I just get lazy and start calling him R-R like on Twitter, and I'm sure new followers are like, who's
this guy? What does that mean?
Yeah.
So we got more questions coming in, which is awesome. So yeah, if you guys got more questions, keep them coming. So we got one from Caitlin Hopkins here. Did Canadian brigades / divisions have their own photographers? I asked because I have some Canadian photos from December 1918 that look professional, but I'm not sure how to find out who took them.
Right. So they didn't. They didn't have their own official photographers. So the 3 photographers that I mentioned were the only ones that were sort of government sanctioned, or military authority was granted to them from the War Office, but individual soldiers and officers did take their own photographs. It was super illegal to do, but it was not very heavily
Yeah.
enforced.
Okay. Okay. Do
And
you have anything, insights into why that's the case?
I don't necessarily. I think Richard Van Emden has talked about this a bit in his books.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Although that's from a British perspective, but still, I
Right.
think that it didn't really matter who you were. There was just this intense drive to document what you were doing. So even if you were an officer, you weren't really that motivated to follow the rules because maybe you wanted to take photographs too. And there's definitely evidence that a lot of officers were also taking photos. So if you have some that look super professional, I wouldn't be surprised if there was just a guy in a specific battalion that just happens to be really good at taking photographs, and maybe he was a professional photographer or a really skilled amateur, and just took his own. But no, they didn't have their own. They didn't have their own individual photographers.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you mentioned that the sort of the drive to commemorate, record, whatever you want to call it. There's so many diaries and letters and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely broke that law that they
For
shouldn't
sure.
have kept, and we still have them today. I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
some of them myself. It's great to get to hold them, physically. Well,
Mhm.
before COVID and everything, but like there's just that drive to kind of be remembered or to remember for later. Like
Yeah.
I know some people did that to kind of write their story of the war. Most of them
Mhm.
didn't end up doing that, but it's definitely an interesting kind of drive that I think still exists. I mean, it's through the Second World War as well. So that's something to keep in mind. I got another question here from Sheldrick6 here. Is the overuse of the same photos by authors a result of laziness, the difficulty of access, rights issues such as money, or all three, or something else?
I think that those were the photographs that were famous then and they're famous now. So they were really famous on exhibition, like the one that's right in front of us over the top. It was a huge sensation. Tens of thousands of people went and saw it. Um, and then so it makes me wonder if when those early histories of the war were coming out, those were the photographs that historians were sort of more familiar with, or they were just more readily available. I have no idea how they procured photographs for their histories. Perhaps they reached out to Library and Archives, although they were the National Archives of Canada then, and said, hey, could you supply us with some photos? And the National Archives were like, hey, why don't you go with these? They're really famous. I think it was, so what I'm saying is I think it was an early availability thing. And that just kind of perpetuated. I would imagine that when copy prints were made from these, so before we digitized, we just made copies. These were probably the ones that they went to first. By the way, this one was sold there were pretty healthy sales for this one as well.
Okay.
So, and then when we Library and Archives Canada did a massive digitization project and digitized every single one of these photographs. They are like fair use now for probably non-commercial uses. So when they started digitizing, I wouldn't be surprised if they started digitizing with these ones as well. So it's just sort
Okay.
of yeah, they were famous then, they're famous now.
That makes sense.
And maybe people are lazy.
Could be. I mean, yeah, that happens. People want, or they're like, maybe laziness isn't the right word. Like people want the iconic stuff.
Yeah,
They expect to see the iconic stuff. And if you don't, you get called out.
for sure. And it's Library and Archives Canada is super hard to navigate. So there's no shade for people that have trouble with it. The only reason I'm sort of okay at it is that I was an intern there years ago. And so I had to work in the back end, and that gave me a knowledge of how to use it as a user. But still,
it's not great, to be honest. I mean, they're doing something to the website now, and anyway, it's frustrating for me when I was trying to do some other stuff and finding some photos that I know, right, for different topics like my dissertation, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Didn't even load the website. So I was like, well, that's great. But anyway, so that's cool. We did another photo here. Yeah, from Scott Grimwood. Are there any known photos of the first motor machine gun brigade at Vimy?
I would have to look that up for you.
That's a good question.
Nothing's coming to mind. Like Brad just saw them all too.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
No, I don't think so. I will just say, like, from my own research, as far as it's hard to know where Castle was that day because not a lot of the photographs actually have names and places in the title for sort of like security and censorship reasons. So official photographers were allowed relative freedom along the Western Front, but they weren't allowed to reveal any kind of military secrets of who is where, when, and what kind of resources do they have. So very few of the titles actually have names in them, other than that one that said 29th Infantry Battalion, which we know is 2nd Division, I think 6th Brigade. So there's not a ton of information about where he actually was that day.
Yeah, it'd be very difficult to kind of narrow that. I mean, trying to track even a company or platoon, as difficult as it is, one man and all of this craziness, especially at Vimy Ridge, right? Okay, so that's what we got for now. Coming across for Twitter questions. I wanted to talk about a few photos that I thought were pretty interesting that you got loaded up.
Yep. Do you just want to go in numerical order?
Yeah. Did I tell you about 1200 or no? Did we skip that one?
You did. Can you see it? I have it pulled up.
I can't see it now.
Oh no. Okay, hang on. Let's see if we can share our screen.
The delight of the internet age, everyone.
Okay, I'm just going to pull it onto my desktop. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is the first photograph that you flagged. Unfortunately, it looks like, oh, it's really pixelated. Okay. Library and Archives Canada, it makes me wonder if they don't have a negative for this, because this looks like it's a really poorly digitized print.
Okay.
And I don't know what's up with that.
Okay, because that's why it kind of struck me, photo itself, because I mean, I'm no expert with photos, but I'm getting more into it all the time, trying to take more photos, as you guys can see online with my social media stuff. But it's just, again, to me, it looks overexposed, right? But that could be a digitization issue. So I was wondering but that seems to make sense that, it's after the fact, because I was like, was that a battlefield issue? Is this done later? Like, because it's a striking photo in the foreground, right? The guys in that hastily dug like slit trench kind of thing. They got
that's right.
there. But like, what's going on in the background? We have no idea. I just thought that was really interesting for that aspect. But that makes sense. It could be done from a non-negative after the fact.
For sure. Yeah. So when we're looking at photographs like this and we want to sort of say anything definitive about them, the best thing we can ever do is go look at the original objects. So if we could, if in a perfect world, we go to LAC, they'd let us into the vault to go see all of those 100+ year old glass plate negatives. And we'd take a look and try to determine what's going on in that background and why does it look so blown out.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Canadian War Museum has a whole set of the prints that I think were just made directly from those negatives, which is really, really cool. So it's good to compare them.
Yeah.
So you would compare what you see from LAC with what you see with Canadian War Museum and see if there's any variations on printing and that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. Do you want to move to the next one?
Yeah. Well, this one's funny.
Yeah, that one is, I just think it's funny. Again, like we were talking about this before, but don't really know what's going on here. I don't know. It just kind of caught me because I was going through them all kind of several times, but I went through all at once. And then I saw the guy in the soft cap there blinking or who knows what. And then the guy next to him, that is an interesting
just
pose.
Like posing.
For a POW. Like, again, we don't know much, but I think it's an interesting thing to kind of to show, like,
exactly.
We don't want to infer, like we've talked about this on Twitter multiple times. We want to infer based on what we see here, but like, I mean, come on, that pose is eye-catching. I mean,
it totally
was he doing that on purpose? I don't know. It looks like it. I mean, again, that's a total guess, but like, he's got that model face going there, so it's like, hey, you're taking my photo. I'm going to have my moment here before I, go to the POW camp here. I just think that's a kind of a cool one.
I think that it's so interesting that we don't understand other people's interactions with the camera 100 years ago, because it was so different for them. They may have never had their photograph taken ever. Probably most soldiers in the Great War probably had a portrait made, and I'm really generalizing. I'm basing this off zero evidence whatsoever other than the existence of seemingly endless soldier portraits. I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of the only times that you stood in front of a camera. So this is a very novel experience that is just, we can't relate to that, obviously.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely not.
Brad flagged this one for me as well because one of the sitters is wearing a Brody helmet and we don't know why. um, I mean, it could be literally anything. He could have picked it up off the battlefield. Somebody could have plunked it on his head. No idea. I mean,
Who knows?
if we were being really ridiculous, we could say that that was even a Canadian wearing his original helmet who put on a German outfit and sat next to a German. Like the fact that there's nothing that we know means that the sky's the limit on craziness. They could both be or Canadians wearing German outfits and one still wearing his Brody helmet. Like,
Anyone's
yeah,
guess is as good as
yeah,
ours.
exactly.
I mean, that's just why it struck me because I was, like I said, I was going through that set you sent me, and this one just kind of popped. I was like, "What is going on here?" Like, because there's all kinds of photos out there of wearing war trophies and
Exactly.
all the German helmets and
Mm-hmm.
different things. So who knows? I mean, they're wearing the same tunic.
Yeah.
I mean,
Who
it's
wants?
just weird to see a Brody helmet like that, when it just says
Mhm.
POW
Yeah.
series or whatever it
Yeah.
says. It's really funny.
Yeah. I think it was what types of Huns captured in the last push or some horrible thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And then so you flagged this one as well.
Oh, can we go back to that? Can we just minimize that one for a second? Because we got a question here.
Oh,
I think we
sure.
touched on it here
Yeah.
from World War I Revisited. Are they showing, sorry, there's a question. So are these showing genuine POWs or Canadians wearing German kit? And I think we already said, we don't know.
We don't, they are all labeled. So there's 18 photographs in the series showing 17 unique groups of men. And then one group is photographed twice. I actually closed the window. I'm sorry. But
Okay.
they're all labeled as types of German prisoners. So they are captioned as though they're all genuine POWs. And then they were all put on exhibition also as POWs. They were published in the Canadian War Pictorial, again as POWs. I have another talk actually on that set that I'll get Brad to link down below, that you can learn all about it, and actually, in fact, all about Vimy Ridge photography. So our best guess is like they're telling us the truth. So I'm kind of just kidding when I say that they could be Canadians. It would be quite a ruse. We don't know. All we can do is work with the evidence that we've been given.
Yeah, so that's, again, yeah, obviously you know more about that than I do. I just think it's interesting because you see all kinds of photos. Again, people are not that different or at all different now.
No.
I mean, people like to play around and dress up and do all kinds of weird stuff with cameras.
That's sort of an interesting comment that we're making, that there's nothing about your physical appearance that makes you German or Canadian.
Yeah.
But it was so common for any photographer of any combatant nation during the First World War to photograph your POWs, to either say, look how great we are, and look, like if you look in their face, there's something really funny about these guys.
Yeah.
Or they would just photograph POW camps to say, look how humane the conditions are.
Yeah, as a propaganda.
Exactly.
thing.
So it's a really super common trope of all First World War photography is to photograph your POWs. So that's pretty good evidence that they probably are genuine.
Yeah, which would make sense. I mean, it's just, again, this is kind of a bigger issue, but the myths and everything and all the propaganda of the First World War is still murky today. I mean, there was perceptions after the war, during the war, then they changed again with the Second World War, and they've changed again since.
Exactly.
So I guess that's like a kind of keep your critical thinking skills going when you're kind of dealing with this stuff.
For sure. Yeah.
I think that's our takeaway from that one. But okay, just going before we go on with the photos here, I found another question. I don't want to miss it.
Yep.
Okay, there it is. So I think this is so it's from Scott Grimwood. I'm not sure what the photo he's referring to is, but he says there is a photo of the Canadian Light Horse at Vimy. Is that image labeled correctly?
As far as I know, I think there's two of them, and they're in a line, and in one somebody's looking back and they're not in the other one. Yeah, as far as I know, like we do kind of just have to trust those labels as well as we can. If we wanted to do a little bit of cross-referencing, if you were, for example, like a uniforms expert, then you could do a little bit of a deep dive and just examine the uniforms and stuff as well. I am not one of those people, but so for the most part, I'm kind of just working with the evidence that Castle has given us. He will have written most of those captions, or at least written notes, and sent them to the Canadian War Records Office, who then turn them into real captions, and then they send them to newspapers, and then newspapers add the spin.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Usually really ridiculous. But as far as I know, those are genuine photographs of the Canadian Light Horse.
Oh, cool. That's cool. Yeah, I just can't even what photo that is now. There's so many after the fact. It's again, like I put together something else for First World War battles, and there's just the Vimy stuff. It's like an avalanche in comparison to everything else.
Exactly.
It's quite crazy and frustrating if you're trying to do something else, or the other battles. It's kind of annoying.
Yep.
But that's a mini rant from me. Yeah, you want to keep going with the photos that I
Sure. This one, I'm sorry, this one's a little bit like kind of crappy quality. I had these just on my computer as like study material, but Brad, why don't you tell me why you picked this one?
Well, the obvious reason, what they're holding, and the way they're looking at it. And yeah, that obviously drew my attention. I've seen this one before. I forget because I do so much in a given day. And then kind of the background and where they could be, or just kind of even the desolation of war, right? With literally a human skull and then a destroyed building of some sort in behind them. So that kind of level of destruction of human and of buildings and surrounding environment is striking.
Yeah.
Just because again, like, because as we know, the Canadians were not the first ones at Vimy Ridge. So
exactly,
like the French had been there fighting the Germans since, what was it, December 1914? The fighting had been going on there for a long time. So, and there's all kinds of accounts of Canadians in the trenches and all kinds of horrific things, running into corpses and skeletons and all that kind of stuff. So do we know anything more about the background of this one at all?
Not really. I think it's just two Canadian soldiers examining skull. This is really weird because it's really unusual for Castle, not really, but quite unusual for Castle to really zero in on a subject like this. In my mind, he's a very like aesthetic photographer who takes a step back and really composes an entire scene. And it's like he's really painterly. I've argued this elsewhere. I think that he doesn't prioritize making me, the viewer, feel like I'm involved. He prioritizes that aestheticism.
Okay.
Is what I've sort of like gleaned from my extreme examination of his work. So it's really weird that when I look at this, I feel like I'm not actually very far away from these two. I feel like I'm sort of participating. So that's unusual for him, much to our chagrin in this case, because it doesn't really quite tell us where they might be. And then, like you said, like it's a testament to the fact that other nations had fought at Vimy Ridge before we did. And this was really something that came up on Twitter yesterday. A few people were just commenting on how Vimy Ridge Day has become this thing that almost like, I don't want to say erases the other battles that took place there, but it I don't know.
Kind of does. I mean, we're historians, so we obviously know context. I mean, that's our thing. But
exactly,
like from the popular, I would say memory, because again, some of my academic work is all about popular memory, memory of war, and all that kind of stuff. So how we think about particular battles, and again, this is a generalized kind of statement, but I think it's a Canadian thing to kind of see our battles in a vacuum. Like,
absolutely.
Because we get pushed to the margins and we don't like that in a lot of ways. And then we complain about that and then we push other people to the margins. I mean, like with the 1915 battle with the French army and the Moroccan, division armed troops that make it to the summit of Vimy Ridge. Yeah. Many Canadians know that. I mean, there's a monument there to these troops. You see the, all words, which we'll get to all words and all that all words monuments and all that stuff. We'll get there. But the one for the French, the Moroccan troops I think it's very striking. I took lots of photos of that when I was there. But again, it doesn't get shown in our literature or our, posts and all that kind of stuff. So we're kind of guilty of the same thing that we complain about, which is, which is not great, and we got to fix that. But
so I selected a few tweets that came up yesterday, and we'll see this later, sort of how other people have framed, and by other people I mean politicians that we're going to throw a tiny bit of shade at. How have they framed that? And I think it really is in that vacuum, and I'm so guilty of that too.
I mean, we all do it.
Yeah,
we just got to be more aware of that, I think.
Exactly. And then so this is our final photograph that Brad has flagged for us.
which I purposely chose yesterday as the photo.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah.
It's so in advance of the week leading up to the Battle of Vimy Ridge anniversary, I sent the entire collection of Vimy Ridge photographs to Brad because I'm a really nice friend. And
I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you.
You're so welcome. What's interesting about them, and again, I've argued this elsewhere in other talks, is that showing pictures of the dead is not the number one way that Castle chose to portray victory at Vimy. I would say captured weapons and captured people. So through that huge series of POWs. So what was taken as opposed to what was lost, I think, is how he chose to portray victory. So that's why this is a really striking image. If you ever look at all of them, is because there's very obviously a fallen soldier in the foreground next to a tank. There's like just this is a common thing that people like to say, but the detritus of war, which is very apt, is everywhere. And then we have soldiers marching on because that's what they have to do. So it's definitely interesting in that sense, but it's sort of doubly interesting because of the negative number O-4429 is completely out of sequence with the rest of them. I believe it starts with O-1113 and ends somewhere around O-1270. So this one's 4429, which normally the negative numbers mean what was the order in which they were received at the Canadian War Records Office. So although it's somewhere from 1112 to 1270 for Vimy Ridge photographs, that doesn't mean that's the order in which they were taken during the battle. It just means like the CWRO received them, wrote numbers on them, and that's what they were. So this one being out of that sequence indicates to us one of two possibilities, or maybe more, but I think the two most likely possibilities are it was left behind, like it just got lost in the shuffle and it got renumbered later, or it was censored and was renumbered later. So right. They're both, I think, equally likely. It's a pretty, what do I want to say? Like, if we had a good quality image here, we'd probably get a good look at the fallen soldier's face, and that's a real problem. You can't really publish that. So that might be what's at issue here. Yep. There is a letter in the records where I want to say it's Lord Beaverbrook, but I could be wrong. Somebody from the CWRO has written to Castle and said, do you know which of your photographs are being held by the censor right now? And Castle says, no, I don't. And so we know that the censor was hanging on to some things. So there's somebody in the field that's doing a quick once over, and then they're being sent to the War Office. And that's where I think a real stringent decision is being made. So they're going through a few different levels of censorship. Right. So yeah, anyway, so this one's interesting for those two reasons, just how evocative it is and the fact that we know that it was taken out of that original numbering sequence.
And that's kind of, obviously, other than the subject matter, that's what kind of caught my eye is the number, like the negative number. Like, exactly, something going on here. Yeah. But yeah, the censorship, and who knows? I mean, mistakes happen, clerical mistakes happen. Things get forgotten all the time. I mean, that's not unsurprising, especially when militaries are huge bureaucracies, right? I mean, it's good for us historians because there's lots of documentation for that kind of stuff, but stuff gets lost in the shuffle. So I have some questions for you, Brad, if you want to let me know. Yeah, fire away. I'm just got caught up with some comments here. Okay, cool. Yeah. So we all know you as the person who runs On This Day in Canadian military history, and you share a lot of primary sources. So do you have a certain kind of primary source material that you like to engage with the most? Not really. I mean, I like it all as a historian, academically trained historian. That's like drilled into your brain, you know, primary, you know, keep those secondary sources away until the last second. The photos I like because they're a good way to connect with, I think with the past, obviously they have the issues that you've discussed at length and we'll keep learning about, and I like learning about it from you and well, Sarah Hart as well on Twitter. I learned so much from you guys. It's crazy. But like, those are really interesting to me. The war diaries I like a lot. Like, I don't know, I guess it comes from a place of a lack of sources, if that makes sense, because my dissertation's on the Battle of Hong Kong. There are war diaries, but they're written months later in a POW camp under terrible conditions. So like, when I see these other battles, I'm like, oh, you guys are so lucky. You know, they wrote this down like a couple hours later. or there's after
Yep.
action reports.
Yep.
So I'm drawn to those kinds of things
Mhm.
because I'm like, to me, to get the war diaries, it wasn't easy, because I had to go to the DHH office, the Director of History and Heritage, part of the Armed Forces.
Yep.
And it was just like, it took longer than even LAC, and it's this craziness. But yeah, like I like using that. Diaries and stuff, it's harder just because I like doing the posts is obviously not my job. Like I just kind of started that for the whole Twitter account thing for fun. I saw nobody else was doing it. I thought, hey, why not? And it's kind of taken on a life of its own in a sense, which I still love doing, but it's starting to do some other stuff, which like right today. But yeah, so like, sorry, the sources and stuff, it can be difficult. There's a lot of secondary stuff I use. I use the official histories a lot, because they're in a PDF and they were free. I don't have money for that kind of stuff to buy all these kinds of crazy books and ebooks and everything. So, and I'm trying to be cognizant of what I'm doing with that. But in terms of like, if I'm going from a source to what I'm trying to do, no, I mean,
yeah,
I just like all the different stuff. There's lots out there, tons of Canadian stuff out there that doesn't get attention as it should. And I'm trying to change that.
For sure. Well, you've actually kind of fed into another question that I have, so I'm just going to skip ahead to it. So you've already alluded to the fact that your specialization right now is the Battle of Hong Kong in the Second World War.
Yeah.
But today we're talking about the Battle of Vimy Ridge, which we know is the most probably mythologized. Is that a word?
I believe it is.
Sort of like in Canadian memory, Canadian popular memory. It's one of the battles that most people at least think they know something about, and it's everywhere. I was saying to Brad that I was just scrolling through hashtag Vimy Ridge Day tweets this morning, and they're everywhere. Like just all these random organizations are tweeting about it, like water filters, like thanks Vimy Ridge.
Yeah.
And so I would say Hong Kong is something that not a lot of people know about. Right now we're working with a battle that a lot of people think they know about it. So is that frustrating for you, or your experience of researching a battle that is not super well known, and then in your face is this community that focuses on these famous battles? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, for sure. Frustrating, no. I'm more frustrated by other things in relation to my dissertation. I mean, I talk about this on Twitter all the time, and the Valor and the Horror and the McKennas. That frustrates me way, way more than, say, getting overshadowed. I mean, I don't think about it that way. But yeah, I mean, all this attention for Vimy Ridge is slightly, I guess, jealous. I don't even know if it's the right word. Yeah, I would like Hong Kong to get that kind of attention, or even other battles, not even the one I'm just working on. I mean, one of the projects I'm working on, it's taken time because things keep coming up, looking at other battles in the First World War, and kind of, I'll get into that later when I get finished, whenever that'll be. But trying to bring more attention to those ones as well. And kind of, and maybe we can talk about this later, but like, there's more going on here than Vimy Ridge.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's not necessarily, like a jealousy thing. Yeah, I wish more people knew about Hong Kong, but overcoming the Vimy mythos package, I don't know what you want to call it.
Yeah,
I don't think that's ever going to happen. But we'll see. I mean, it's like, again, I want to talk about the monument, so we can get into a little bit about that. But so yeah, it's kind of frustrating, but not in the way you would expect.
I do want to ask you about that, about the monument. And what I was going to say is that if after something like Tim Cook's book, Vimy, The Battle and The Battle and the Legend, it's on my kitchen table right now. Yeah, not in my office. Anyway, he writes, the Vimy Memorial, with its white, almost luminescent stone, stands on the ramparts of a ridge in northeastern France, a site of mass killing and myth making. So I wonder what you make of that, or like, if you want to tell me about your experience about being there.
Yeah, so yeah, I've been there myself. It's interesting because my context is, sorry, a little bit of story time here. So I'm drawn to the memorials, war memorials. I have been so my whole kind of life. So anyway, so I think it was the Laurier Center there, the military. So it was doing a Vimy conference, and I wanted to like get into that kind of stuff, looking at the memorial, and then lo and behold, Tim Cook is writing on the exact same thing at the same time, and I went, oh, good. So anyway, so I was doing some digging on that. Because after the year prior, I had gone on a battlefield tour and had gone to Vimy, and it was kind of striking to see it in person for the first time. I mean, it's you can't not be impressed. I mean, I was there on the worst weather imaginable. You couldn't even see you couldn't see the monument from the parking lot For
Wow.
those of you who have been there,
Mhm.
I mean, on a clear day, that thing stands out.
Right, because it's a
When I
bright
went,
blue sky
oh
and
yeah,
a giant white monument.
yeah.
Right.
But when I was there, you couldn't see it. Like it was crazy. And then when you're on the monument yourself, you couldn't see down the hill, even to the tree line almost. So it was like, that's kind of, I don't know, in my mind, that's what it looks like, right? Is this kind of, in fog, but obviously all the photos are not that. So
Right.
it's got this other image for other people. For me, it's kind of this contained kind of thing. But again, that's just myself. But yeah, so like I've been there, took lots of photos. The ground itself is it's got to be seen to be believed. I mean, it's in the red zone that they call it. It's not going to be habitable probably, I don't know, who knows how long, maybe ever.
Mhm.
So it's untouched. I mean, yeah, there's the whole stories and a lot of myths about what the park is and how they got it and everything and all that, which I've dug into a little bit. But yeah, like it's to see it and then to be in the preserved trenches that they did because they were bored because the memorial took forever is interesting. Like going in the tunnels is cool. So like when
Mhm.
COVID's over and you can get there, go. If you haven't been, do it. Everyone go. I mean, we'll probably think we might have a negative view of this, and I don't. We get we're academics, historians is what we do. But yeah, go check it out so you can kind of see for yourself kind of what I'm talking about. Like just that pockmarked land is going to stick
Mhm.
with me forever.
Right.
Seeing that area is just like it just yeah. No offense to anybody, but the photos don't do it justice.
Yeah, to be there is just something else.
Yeah, it's
I
kind
think
of yeah.
that's interesting that we look at Vimy in public memory with a little like you said, like some skepticism or just a little bit of frustration because there were battles that were probably a little bit more important in the big picture, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that we don't love being there.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like I
uh
mean, yeah, it's yeah, that's not what's going on at all.
yeah, so I have some tweets. Do you want to go
Yeah,
more
I don't think there's
questions?
any other questions at the moment. No,
Okay.
just more comments talking about maybe we'll get to it later about impact and memory and connections to the Second World War, that kind of thing.
Oh, you had a question about trench raiding. So I did.
Oh, yeah, right. I forgot about that. Hold on.
That's okay.
Do you
So
want
I
to do
brought.
that now?
I'm just going to skip ahead actually. So these are some tweets that
Yeah, we'll
came
come
up.
back to that.
I have quite a few of them about our displeasure with different. So I'm just gonna. I don't like Don Cherry, but he didn't actually say anything wrong in this tweet. I just brought him up to be a jerk, and he can sit next to Aaron O'Toole. So Aaron O'Toole says Canadians conquered Vimy Ridge, and we can win the battle against COVID too. Um, and so this is something that, if we're talking about popular memory, like hijacking the story of Canadian soldiers to stand on your soapbox is not okay.
Yeah, I called that out on my personal Twitter account last night because I didn't see it till later because I was so busy
Right.
yesterday with everything going on. But I was just like, seriously, come on.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and then so I flagged a whole bunch of these tweets that are talking about the birth of a nation. Um,
Yeah.
and so this quote from Alexander Ross, I
Oh,
don't know
good.
if you have it's quite a bit later, right? Like
Yeah, I got the book. Hold on. I flagged that up, obviously. Because Tim's other book, Tim Cook's other book. You can see it there. This is one you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
He talks about it in here. It was 67. It was in an
Okay.
introduction to another memoir.
So it's not, I mean, nobody said this in 1917.
As far as we know.
Right.
I mean, one dude in the trench may have that. I doubt it, but
yeah.
nothing's ever definitive.
You're
right?
from Halifax. I'm from Kelowna. That
Yeah.
guy's from Toronto, and that guy's from Manitoba. Sweet. We are Canadians now.
Canada, woo! Yeah, like probably not, but
No.
yeah. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Not to, I mean, we're not minimizing what anyone did.
No, not at all.
Or what we're saying though is that we can't actually put ourselves in the shoes of Canadian soldiers that were there. So to say that anybody felt a sense of national pride, or is there one kind of national pride? I think our inability to relate to these kind of statements indicates that there isn't one Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have some more. Oh, right. The result was an incredible victory, which helped turn World War I in favor of the Allies.
Yeah, that's a favorite trope of mine.
In spring of 1917, when the war would continue for about a year and a half afterwards.
Yeah, like I mean,
And so this, I'm pretty bad for this too, like what we said, of viewing individual battles in a vacuum and not thinking about, of course, the outcome of Canadians at Vimy had an impact, for better or worse, of what was going to happen afterwards. And people will point to the German Spring Offensive the following year, essentially, and talk about the effect that Vimy had on the Germans' success up to a point. But no, you can't. Sorry, I'm not even an operational historian at all, but I don't think that you can look at the Battle of Vimy Ridge knowing that the Spring Offensive was going to happen about a year later.
Yeah.
And, like, it was not at all a foregone conclusion in April of 1917 what was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, like, I know I wouldn't consider myself an operational historian. I like to do all kinds of different stuff, but looking at it, because I, again, had to look at the monument itself and kind of learning context, it does nothing to end the war. Like, it's not even close. Like, I mean, if we even just pull out a little bit and just look at the Arras offensive that's going on around Vimy Ridge, which is also a kind of precursor to the French offensive that's coming later, which leads to the mutinies. I mean, that's a huge one. But it, like you said, you mentioned the spring offensives, like all that territory that is gained in 1917 is lost.
Exactly.
Spring offensives.
Right.
So again, it's just this kind of historical illiteracy that's expected, I guess. Doesn't mean we like it, but it's still there. And this is a perfect example.
Exactly. And I mean, I kind of feel bad for these people that I'm posting their tweets on here, because you have to know that there's probably some kid getting paid minimum wage to do PR for them.
Yep.
So there is that. But so the Conservative Party of British Columbia, my home province, is also saying that a new sense of Canadian identity was established. The Canadian Armed Forces, I'm so sorry for what I'm about to say about you. Canada's most celebrated military victory and a venerated symbol of the birth of Canadian national pride and awareness.
Yeah.
Another quote from Eyewitness: the birth of the nation. Okay, so actually, why I don't know why I have Seamus O'Regan Jr. here, because it's not actually the worst.
Well, more should be expected of him, I would think, as a former Veterans Affairs minister.
Yeah. I don't know why I flagged that one. Sorry, Seamus.
Well, it's got the tropes in it. I mean,
you said nothing that was inaccurate, really. And so, right. Again, I'm throwing a lot of shade here, and these are just a few. These are the ones, not Seamus, where they're just bringing up the same kind of recycled things that we've seen. But that's to say nothing about loads of people on Twitter that were just saying perfectly normal, nice things that are just to give your thanks to the Canadian forces. And that's completely fine and good. And that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Let's see. Launched allied. Oh, okay. So where our allies had tried and failed, Canadians succeeded. I think that's a crappy thing to say.
Yeah, it's again part of this whole the myth behind it, right? The French fail.
Yeah.
We already talked about that, but they obviously they do to take the summit. I guess the Moroccan troops get there. They don't hold it, but they get there. So failure, right? I don't know. They get the start line, and hold that start line. And then there's always the trope, right, that the British also attacked, which they never did, right? It wasn't a full-out offensive to try and take the ridge. It just held the sector. It's not the same thing. Like, that goes on all over the First World War, right? Like, could use that logic, right? Well, we failed, Second Ypres because we didn't advance. Like, that doesn't make sense. Right. So, like, that one comes up again, and then it creates issues, right? Because we, again, like I like to say, and up to people all the time, and talked about this earlier, is we have that chip on our shoulder a little bit, right? That we feel we're marginalized, not talked about enough.
Right.
And then we do things like this.
And exactly. Yeah.
Everyone else failed. We're amazing,
I think that this language goes right back to reportage at the time. If we read something like Rila of Ingleside by Lucy Maud Montgomery, the characters are reading about Vimy Ridge in the book, and they're saying, like, the French tried and the British tried, and so, like, I see where they're coming from. And so really what we're doing here is just whining, but also it's just that we see, if we're talking about the myth of Vimy, the way that photographs get used or misused, then we're seeing like a misuse of language, or maybe not the best choice of not the best way to talk about it, perhaps.
No, I mean, yeah, yeah, you're right. Like that whole idea of everyone else fails, we succeed. I don't like that because we got lots of failures.
Yeah. And
We talk about
we're
them.
bad for talking about them
Yeah,
too
I mean, Second
much.
World War more, right?
Yeah.
Because there's more of them, and that's all there was for a while. I mean, that's a huge chunk of my work. But anyway, that's a digression. But the First World War, there's failures, lots of them. We don't talk about them. I
Yep.
mean, we're actually well. If you had more tweets that you wanted to look at, or is that?
Oh, these are some good ones.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah,
Uh,
let's switch focus, and then we can go back
let's
to
not
my
be so
point.
mean
Yeah.
to everyone. Okay, so Graham Broad says that it's the anniversary of Vimy Ridge, not meaning to be a contrarian. Clearly I am. But if anyone has any actual evidence that the battle significantly promotes national identity in present-day Canada, I'd be interested to hear it. We'll also need a definition of national identity. So I think, again, like we are being contrarians, but Graham is completely right. Is there one kind of identity for being Canadian? I don't think so. And I think it's okay that there's not. And to talk about it like there is not productive in an academic sense because there's no evidence.
No. I mean, I just made a joke about a hat and got jumped on, but
That's
as
so
is
funny.
Twitter. But yeah, I just throw that there to be funny. But yeah, it's that's a question. It's never going to get answered.
Exactly, and that's
impossible.
Okay.
Yeah, perfectly fine. But I just like discussing it, so it's a way in,
sure.
right?
Yeah. And then Mike Bechtold has a really great thread. So if you're on Twitter, go check it out and give it a like or a retweet. Yeah. Where he's got a lot of just different sources that are pulling apart that Vimy myth and saying maybe it wasn't Canada from colony to nation, and some things that you can read or watch and yeah, so it's a good one.
And yeah, I retweeted it yesterday, but take a look at it. It's a really well done for being the the limitations of Twitter that we all kind of have.
Exactly.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say we've been doing it for about an hour, so I don't know if we have some questions to maybe like wrap it up or.
Yeah, we got to. Well, Caitlin Hopkins makes an interesting point here, and talking about the book you mentioned, The Ryla of Ingleside, is that she notes that Vimy Ridge is a blip in the narrative, but Courcelette is kind of the pivot.
Absolutely,
point,
yep.
Which is very interesting, right? Because Courcelette is the song, which has its own connotations, memories, popular memory, the slaughter on the Somme, other people, it's got its own historical debates and the historiography, and popular memories, its own debates. I think they're separate, honestly, but that's another thing. But I think it was important during the war, like
absolutely
knowing what, like the Somme goes on for, what was it, 6 months? Yeah, ish.
July to November.
Yeah, so it was hard to miss, and it's the scale is interesting. But yeah, so it's just how we think about it. It doesn't mean that's how they think about it.
For sure.
Or what are the points that we highlight now?
Yep.
I mean, I got some probably controversial opinions we can talk about, but I wanted to go on another one here. Just go back to the photos real quick because I don't want to. This is a good one from Sheldrake 6 again. In terms of the volume of photos, is Vimy overrepresented? Is that because there were fewer photos taken, I assume, of other battles?
Yep.
Or fewer preserved?
I'd have to take a look. I did some comparisons with Vimy and Passchendaele. So that's Ivor Castle at Vimy and William Ryder at Passchendaele. And I do think there's fewer. And then I think if we wanted to think of a battle that was really healthily represented, and this is more than one battle though, is the 100 Days. So there's a lot of photographs of the 100 Days, and they're really wonderful. And by that, I mean, well composed, evocative, emotional, just like what you want from a First World War photograph. I think that Ryder is probably the most successful of all of the three, and his work in 1918 is just really stellar. So obviously that's more than one battle, though. I want to say Battle of Amiens actually probably has quite a few. So I don't have numbers for you. It's not super usual for a battle to have so there's about 150 photographs of the Battle of Vimy Ridge. I couldn't pick out another one for you right now and say, yeah, this one has just as many. So it's probably a little bit overrepresented.
Which again, this is like completely anecdotal, but again, I've done some digging and yeah, put in Vimy Ridge and you get overwhelmed. Put in, I don't know, I'm trying to do, what was the other one? I'm trying to do Even Hill 70.
Hmm.
It's like a desert. So,
Yep.
I mean, it's, again, that's just anecdotal, but I
Exactly.
think it speaks to a deeper kind of
Hmm.
connection I think that they're getting at with this question here. Yeah, so that's questions for now. I want to pivot to the memorial because you can't not talk about it. I've been there. And I guess we can start with an opinion I have. Maybe you disagree with me. That's maybe kind of what I'm hoping, but is because the memorial is on Vimy Ridge, is what it plays a huge part in why we remember Vimy Ridge,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like I think
100%.
that
Yeah.
that's a huge part because again
Yep.
I did some digging on this and it wasn't supposed to be there originally.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be at Hill 62
Hmm.
in the Eep salient, which
Right.
I think is interesting. I mean, been to both, did a presentation on both, comparing photographs I took, right? My
Hmm.
photographs of, and one of my arguments is there's an aesthetic quality at Vimy Ridge that I'm sorry, no, I love Flanders, love the people, no
Hmm.
anything bad about them, but the vistas are not in comparison. I mean,
Right.
Flanders is low
To just like
lying.
this wide open space
Yeah,
that is
like, and
Vimy.
then you can see, the forever from
Yep.
Vimy. And like, you're not going to come close. I
Hmm.
mean, and again, I only could get so far with the sources, but there's a contract where it's written in hand, like it was typed up. And then it has still Hill 62, Belgium. That's all crossed out in pencil.
Right.
Now it's going to be at Vimy and now France, and that
For
changed
sure. Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So I
And
think that plays a huge part in this.
that's right. Sorry, I'm not going to disagree with you there.
Yeah.
And
So
that
I like, yeah.
it's just that the memory is so manufactured and we need to remember that. Um, I think even Curry said, obviously before he died, which was that he didn't think that Vimy was the most impressive.
Yeah.
He thought that several of the 100 Days battles were far more impressive because, of course, it brought about the end of the war.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, again, we can get like this is more the operational, but to me, Canal de Nord and Bordelon Wood, to
Yeah.
me, far more, sorry, interesting.
Yeah.
The planning, like it's what Vimy's planned for how long? Seemingly forever. Bordelon Wood and Canal de Nord are planned in less than a month, having difficulty, reconnoitering the ground. The Germans were holding on to that area very hard because they knew it was their last fallback of the Hindenburg line.
Right.
So, I mean, I find it more impressive of the plan itself, kind of sorry, again, we're getting off topic, but that bottleneck that kind of was planned that worked, luckily, for Curry and the Canadian Corps and all those men that lived through it, is far more interesting. So I think Vimy has taken on this. It's gone more of the status because of the memorial and the story of the memorial itself is part of the story. I mean, Allward's an interesting guy. Reading his letters and letters about him paints a picture of kind of a, sorry not to offend anyone, but like the crazy artist. He was a little out of his depth. He was not an architect. He was a sculptor, and that caused problems later on. But anyway, so it caused problems also when they were making it. I mean, it takes forever. Like, that's why we have the preserved trenches. They were bored. What else you got to do when this guy can't figure out what he's doing? Again, I mean, it's a piece of art and it's amazing, but it was not done well, and it took way too long. The cost overruns were crazy. Allward threatened to quit. I can't remember, like 4 times, I think, in my own research on it. He's like complaining about the money and wanting more and all this kind of other stuff. And the people who are working with him are like, there's a depression. What can we do? Yeah, I think that's part of it too. And like, because again, Tim Cook's book on it explains it better than I can right now. But it's really interesting. I think part of it again, and then the unveiling of it is huge. The Vimy pilgrimage. I mean, it's Edward VIII's I think it's his only official duty as monarch.
I don't know that, but I'm sure somebody else. I'm going to believe you. Yeah.
I think it is his only official, appearance, because, he was only king for 8 months. It's got this whole story behind it. And that's, again, Tim Cook talks about this, but that building it over the decades, right?
Right.
Is definitely part of it. So I kind of want to get because you got that, education and more perspective, I think, on artistic things than I do. I was kind of wondering, like, your impressions on the monument and all that connected with it.
Right. Well, I mean, when we were there, it was there was a conversation of like, is this Canadian or is this over the top? Or Canadians not over the top? Like, is
Yeah.
this too ridiculous to be Canadian? I just think it's beautiful. Um, that's a really in-depth art historical analysis for you. Um, to see like Mother Canada bereft is really breathtaking. And yeah, I don't know that I have a really detailed analysis to give you other than I think it is okay that it's Canadian. I think it is okay to be over the top.
Mm.
I'm not mad about it. The fact that at least one battle has captured the imagination of Canadians is actually all right with me, despite all of my griping.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
So,
completely
and
agree.
I loved being there. I can't wait to go back. I took beautiful photographs because it was a bright blue sky when I was there. It's very hard to get a bad photograph of that monument.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you're right that the landscape is just ripe for this gigantic thing. And to see all the names as well. I think there's over 11,000 names of soldiers with no known grave.
Yep.
It is very moving. There is an element of pilgrimage when you're on a battlefield tour. You maybe go to one or two sites only. It's similar, I think, to a religious pilgrimage, although it's not. And a feeling of place when you're there is really tangible. So yeah, I don't know that I have anything else to add to that other than I'm not mad about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say like I'm mad about any of
Yeah.
this mythos what Vimy has. I mean, that's one of my gripes, I guess.
Mhm.
It's, I don't know, with the Second World War in a sense, is we don't have an image or a myth
That's
like
right.
that. We
Yeah.
have Juno Beach, and I mean, we have the Juno Beach Center. I know Alex is watching. Yeah, he's still there. And the work they do is great, but it's not the same. It's not even close. I mean, that's no fault through anybody who's working on that
No.
now.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
just, it's, I wish it was, honestly.
Mhm.
I mean, it was Dieppe for a while, but even then it wasn't the same. It never
That's
has
right.
been.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to say it's Vimy and, you know, Vimy, and then again, they're little yesterday on Twitter, people are like, oh, the Canadians are talking about Vimy again, you know,
Yeah.
like as I got a few of those, but yeah, it's better than nothing. I mean, we have
Yeah.
Second Eep, we have the Burning Soldier, which is very striking in its own way.
It
I mean,
is. Absolutely. Yes.
that was, I think that's also interesting too, that story. I mean, because they picked Allward's design to be the primary, whatever you want to call it. And then Clement Shaw's design for the Brooding Soldier was supposed to be everywhere else.
Right.
Right. But the cost overruns, depression, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Kibosh that, and they put in those, I don't know what they call them, the cubes or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
With just a quick description of what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not the greatest, but yeah, anyway. But I think that's very interesting too. I mean, Second Eep is obviously important, but it's forgotten in a large sense, other than I think when the anniversary comes up and then during the centenary and all that stuff. It's important too, but it doesn't have the power that Vimy does.
That's right.
Nothing ever will. I mean, like I said, I think Canal of the Nord is far more impressive. But
yeah,
the landscape is not. It's a slight rolling hill. That's about it.
Yeah, even just if we're taking or thinking again about photography, the Battle of Amiens is just like beautiful photographs that are just like so striking. And I don't know, I'm probably projecting and I shouldn't be, but there's a sadness or something about them. They're very moving to me in a way that other battle photographs aren't.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know if it's our own opinion, just kind of what we think. But
I did hope to have some photos revolving, and then technology got the better of me today. So I'm very sorry for the dearth of imagery.
Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. We've been having some technical issues that I was fighting with this morning, and we'll fix for if you guys like this and we do another one. I'll fix. But
Amiens, it's coming up.
Well, yeah, I'd love to do Amiens. I mean, that battle is not known enough, and it's super interesting, and the photos and everything around it is so cool. But yeah, I don't think we had any other questions.
No more questions.
There was one question, but it got answered in the chat about the I forgot what it was called. That one that was supposed to be the statue in Cape Breton, like Mother Canada or something that got canceled.
I would totally,
I think that's what it was called. Yeah, it was supposed to be pointing towards Vimy, something. I don't know. It was supposed to be massive. It got canceled. but yeah, we're getting a lot of comments about visiting the sites, surprises, about the young guides, which they do a great job. Because I've only been to Vimy once. We did do the tour, and because I went in the tunnels, which are super cool. But that's the way to get in the tunnels is you have to do a guided tour. You can't just kind of do it by yourself. Lots of interesting ways of that. I think Canada goes about it, having younger people lead it. People I've talked to are always struck by the age, right? Because younger people were fighting in these battles. I mean, Beaumont Hamel and Vimy Ridge are the ones that are staffed, I guess you want to say, that people are always very pleasantly surprised when they get there for the tours and what people know. I mean, there's another striking battle. I mean, Beaumont Hamel, first day of the Somme.
Well
known in Newfoundland, no problem. Obviously, will be probably for a very long time.
Yeah.
Leave the province and no one knows what you're talking about, which is unfortunate. I mean, it's its own mythos around it, but the site itself is super impressive. Walking those trenches is again, it's almost undescribable. And I use the photo of the caribou at Beaumont Hamel for all kinds of stuff. Not because I'm obsessed with my own photography or anything. It's just that statue just sticks out to me, like almost because it literally does, right? Sticks out above the trenches.
It's so unique. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's just like it's sorry again, it's just thinking about it now, it's just so striking and it doesn't get the attention. Even though it's staffed by the same people, like they switch. They do Vimy and then they go do Beaumont Hamel another day. And then oh yeah, and someone just mentioned the Commonwealth War Graves Commission is copied the Canadian program at Tyne-Cot, which is another impressive site. I mean, it's the biggest Commonwealth War Graves cemetery in the world. I mean, it's massive, which is also very sad because the number of deaths is almost unfathomable until you see it. Same with the Manning Gate and at Thiepval and all that stuff. But anyway, did you have any more questions for me or anything else you wanted to talk about? Or?
No, I think this has been a successful run of our inaugural live stream.
Yeah, a few hiccups along the way. Probably went too long, but that happens.
Oh, we're good. But thanks to everyone who came out and watched and had great questions for us. And if you liked it, we'll do another one. And hi to everyone in the future who's going to watch this.
Yeah. So thanks everybody. I really appreciate everybody coming out. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us both on Twitter. I'm going to link some stuff afterwards all over the place. Again, you're going to get annoyed by us. So we're going to probably be so in your face for the next couple of days with all this stuff. But we do want to share what we've done just because we like talking about this stuff. We can talk about this stuff forever and ever and ever and ever. It's great to have everybody here. So stay tuned. I do have some more stuff I'm working on. I'm going to do not a live stream because it's just too difficult, but coming up with Graham Broad about the Royal Flying Corps in Canada and Canadians in the Royal Flying Corps at the first part of the war. Again, another understudied area. So we want to kind of dig into that a little bit. So look for that soon, hopefully sometime by the end of the week, but no promises because I can't promise anything anymore. So with that stuff for right now. So yeah.